morning, everyone. Nate Den here for another TSgt LNO Fireside Chat. The last few episodes, we've really tried to highlight different innovations throughout the field and how projects have come to be, and really just highlight an idea to a full project mode and getting those items started and the hurdles and the successes along the way. This chat is a little bit different as we're going to tie it into the Aether Sprint, and we have one of the teams here with us today that's going to talk about their product, which is the WMS cover. I'm not going to deep dive too much into it. Guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us about what your project is, how you got into the sprint, and some of those hurdles along the way, and then we'll jump in with any questions that we have as you guys speak to yourself.
I'm Sergeant Wodicka from the 495th FGS out here at Lake and Heath in Europe, and this is Sergeant Hunter.
Yep, out here, team members, helping them get everything rolling.
So we led the F-35 weapons management switch cover project, and we've been running with the project since this last summer, and we just recently submitted it through Aether Sprint. And we just recently got back from the BYOA event down at Andrews Air Force Base, and the project has been moving along pretty good. We've got a MVP printed off, and we finalized what our production is going to look like. And we're currently working with Tinker Air Force Base to print off 60 covers and get them mailed over here so we can roll into our 3-month validation, where we're going to uncover whether or not this thing truly works.
That's awesome. So you guys have already said you started this idea mostly last summer. Let's start at the super beginning, very basic. How did we discover what this thing is? Who thought of why we need this thing, and what does it do?
So right here, I have a throttle for an F-35, and located on top, this castle switch that you see, we call this the weapons management switch. And a large issue that we've been running into is we've been kicking the switch off when individuals get in and out of the cockpit. And kicking the switch off, it's slight. There's a couple contributing factors to it, but the bottom line comes to it's getting physically damaged. And we started looking at potentially getting new switches and 3D printing switches off, and then we really drilled down to the root cause of what the problem was. And the problem is that the switch is getting hit in the first place. So we tried developing a solution that addresses that core issue and prevent the physical damage in the first place, which the repair for us, it takes at a minimum, it takes us 5 hours to fix this switch when we kick it, because we have to wait for glue to cure. And at the far end of it, it's 18 hours to repair the switch, because we might be looking inside of a cockpit, pulling the seat out and doing all the follow-ons that are included with that to find the FO, because we're not going to fly the aircraft until we find the switch. So it hits our FHP pretty effectively. It's when we kick a switch off, that aircraft is done flying for the day. That could have been a fully mission-capable aircraft that was ready to go, loaded up with bombs, ready to go drop them, ready to go execute a mission. And the pilot gets into the seat, kicks the switch off on the way in, and then it's no longer good. Now we step into a spare, if we have one, and degrading that aircraft out of the mission. So what we did was we went through and started developing a cover for it, because we've had covers in the past, but they failed. And we started looking at the core issues of why those previous attempts to fix the issue failed. Were these giant covers that had 21 pieces of hardware that would fall off inside of the cockpit, create a fault issue, and they weren't durable, and then they couldn't be stored in the cockpit. So we tried to make something that addressed all those issues. So we made this single piece flexible cover that's durable. You can crank this thing, you can give it to a crew chief, and it'll live. And it's small enough that it can be stored within the cockpit, and then it snaps onto the top of the throttle, similar to how a cell phone case snaps onto a phone. And with that, we're able to store it in the map case up there, so the pilot can get into the seat and get everything ready, get situated, and then when he's ready to start the aircraft up, he can pop this off, throw it into the map case where it's not going to get damaged. It's just going to stay inside of there. And then when he's done with his missions, before getting out of the aircraft, he reaches into the map case, grabs it, and pops it back on. And now we're back protected. And this thing can take a hit. It's going to survive. It's 3D printed out of TPU. And so it's got a lot of elasticity to it and the durability that comes with that. And it absorbs some of the shock and it kind of dissipates it over to the body of the throttle versus letting the switches take the brunt of the damage. The solution we worked through, right now we're at 11 different MVPs that we're on the 11th version of the throttle cover. After we've rapidly prototyped it through all the different 3D print attempts, because it's such a complex shape, getting it just right so that it has the ability to kind of snap on there with the right amount of force both ways, putting it on and taking it off, and then finding a material that was able to work for us with the environment challenges that we face, leaving the jets out in the winter. And it's going to freeze. We had some materials that once it got below 40 degrees, they were no longer flexible. So if you left the cover on and then put the aircraft out in the snow, now all of a sudden you can't get the cover off from the throttle. So small issues like that we worked through, and then some design changes and finding the manufacturers that can actually support the resolution demands that we needed for such a complex and low tolerance cover.
We tested this one down to about 30 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and it maintained its flexibility. It's been tested up to probably around only about 100 degrees right now.
Yeah.
And
it'll go well to 150 and keep its shape.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great product. In its 2-week validation, the initial validation, we did not lose any switches, and that was a pretty good thing, especially when we were seeing an average of 2 per month prior to that. So we didn't lose any, and then the following week after that went right back into losing switches again, and it's been a trend. So we're hoping to eliminate that whole issue.
Yeah, and to kind of speak to the number side of this, I didn't really touch on it very well, but so we kick off. The F-35 program has kicked off 770 of these switches since 2016. And each one of those requiring a minimum of 5 hours of repair. Currently on the trend for data, that's costing us over 1,000 NMC hours a year. And that's erring on the side of cautiousness with it. And not only is that 1,000 NMC hours a year, that's 1,000 NMC hours a year that's concentrated in our flying window, because that's when we're actually kicking the switches off, is when individuals are getting in and out of the cockpit, trying to get the aircraft ready for flight, whether it's a maintainer doing the pre or post inspection during an aircraft turn, or it's a pilot getting into the seat to ready the aircraft to execute its mission. And right now at Lake and Heath specifically, we've had 50 instances since we got aircraft less than 2 years ago. Well, right about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That we got our aircraft, and we've had 50 switches kicked off since then. So hopefully we're a pretty good test point for this. With 3 months of testing, we'll be able to quantify whether or not this is an impactful solution.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, guys. And clearly you identified something that needed to be corrected in order to save time, not only for you, but for the weapon system itself. My next question really is, so you went from, and this really happens a lot in the innovation space, you went from having this idea, you identify a need, you create something to solve the problem. What has the journey been like, at least for you, along the way to really be heard with your project? And who's been in your corner to kind of champion this idea at the higher levels to get these ideas through? Because, you know, the biggest hurdle I think that most airmen, capital A, have when they have an idea to try to correct something is not that the Air Force doesn't want it or won't need it. It's how do I get into the right offices or the right space in order to get this idea all the way through the wickets that it needs to do through testing. I think you said you already have a patent for this item. Like, yes. That's a lot of different stuff. So how's that journey been for you?
Oh, man. So the first 3 months of this project, and probably the first 8 prototypes, that all happened both behind closed curtains of me going home at the end of the day and opening up CAD. and designing the cover. I dumped about 200 hours into it myself before I let the thing see the light of day. But then once I did, I exposed it to our former innovation cell that we had here, Liberty Works, and because I had a close relationship with the individuals there, they saw it and saw the potential that it had. And Chiffon, our wing process manager, he immediately threw it into the USAFE ITC, which is the Innovation Transformation Council, which is where they essentially, every base gets to pick a project that they're working on and highlight that to the USAFE deputy commander. And so the first, I was playing catch up from the very beginning of getting this thing in front of people before we even really had like proof that it works. The concept was there, and like we physically had some prototypes, but in July, I had this thing set. I had a quad chart built with the ITC with a wing process manager, and we presented it to Major General Lamontagne from USAFE, deputy commander, and that went well. Got tons of support from him. Everyone loves seeing stuff 3D printed to fix our problems that typically would be not achievable because we'd have to build up a whole production line with molds and inject and mold it otherwise. But it started there. Shortly after, it got accepted into the AFWERX refinery, where the project really started to pick up some steam and started moving through some of the other prototypes and building up a project management path for it. And kind of seeing what the future looked like and building out, like that's where we kind of discovered what validation looks like for us. And it's also where we started working with some of our partners like Tinker. We got the chance to go visit them because of the AFWERX refinery. They part of our TDY, we went out to the Tinker and saw all their equipment, got to speak with Jason Mann, who was part of the React team, who has the capability to make this cover in its current state. Because we were running into a lot of issues that we ran into locally printing the item off the hardware that we have here. We have just consumer grade recreational 3D printers. They work and they'll get your prototypes out there, but for a commercial industrial scale application, they weren't exactly consistent, and they were eating up a lot of man hours with failed prints and just prints that had voids in them, prints that just weren't the right shape. They had these defects that were making the quality start to suffer. But with him, we were able to partner and get something actually professionally printed. These SLS printers, this thing is exactly what it looks like. The layer size on these things is insane. It's the equivalent of resin 3D printers, which we had some issues with the materials calling back to the materials freezing. Everything that we printed off in resin would freeze when it got to too low of a temperature. But anyways, back to the support and getting in front of headquarters people. That's the refinery really helped with that because they also brought us to the Pentagon after kind of meeting us with our Tinker. They got us to the Pentagon and they got us to the F-35 Joint PWIG, and we were able to talk to a lot of our partners at the JPO and throughout the fleet and kind of get this thing socialized in front of them and say, hey, look at what we have going on here. And I picked up a couple POCs of people that are interested in tracking the project. And then at the Pentagon, we were able to get this in front of our half A4 and present to them and got the idea socialized with them. But the thing is we haven't really been needing to ask for a lot of money because it's such a cheap project to get through. So we're coming in there asking more for give us some champion this thing getting into the JSF program, hook us up with the right people that we need to talk to get this thing implemented and sustained once we test it out and prove that it works. And so that's been, once we got out of the JPO meeting, the Joint PWIG, the Chief Master Sergeant McRoberts, he met up with us. He's actually from USAFE headquarters, and we met in States. And then he invited us out to the F-35 European user group working group, where in October we went up to Leeuwarden in the Netherlands and we presented the same thing there. And that's where we finally like kind of struck the program sustainment side of it. We met the right people in the room. It was as soon as we started talking, we got into the F-35's. They call it the OMO, Organizational Maintenance Optimization Team. And we got this thing submitted into there through Senior Master Sergeant Buell and his team. Senior Master Sergeant Buell was at the F-35 user group working group, and he's essentially brought us in and said, hey, this thing, we can make your project integrate into the 35 program. Email me and I'll send you all the contacts. And we worked out the meetings, we got into their triage group, and we started going through, and we're currently going through that process still. We've been through the initial meetings, and right now we are pending approval. They're in their data acquisition phase where they're going to quantify our problem and look at the solution and balance the ROI, build a business case for getting this thing into the program, and then approve it, or not approve it, retire, or they say. And then we also got into the Aether Sprint in November. And through the Aether Sprint, we were able to kind of get this thing even more credibility, maintain that socialization of this happening, and kind of roadmap what our phase 4 and our phase 5 really look like. Because we've had like phase 3 and kind of figured out a lot, but phase 4 and phase 5 were kind of blurry on the details. But Aether Sprint brought us out to Andrews Air Force Base and got us into the BYOA, Build Your Own Adventure, where we were able to kind of look at the foresight on where the project's going. And depending on the results of the Aether Sprint, we may be able to get this thing out to LOA and get it in front of some more stakeholders in March. But right now we're semifinalists. So we're 1 of 7, and 3 of 7 will wind up going to LOA.
Yeah, that's awesome. What has the journey been like personally for you? How many times have you guys had to shift, refocus, tell yourself the effort is worth it? If I just keep this thing through, I know it's good. I know this will benefit the Air Force. It's still worth my time to put into this.
1 second. Our motion sensor doesn't think we're in here anymore. Yeah. All right. Air Force Saving Energy. So at the very beginning, I had that huge rush of excitement with like getting in front of a problem, and like you just have that creative spur of energy where you have like this bottomless pit that you can dig into. You're super motivated to get the project. Go in there in a CAD and create stuff, and the dopamine rush is there, and that's all you really need. As it went on, the initially getting it passed was really tough, because it was and honestly, without any champions, it would have been impossible. But I think just getting the project out there to stakeholders and being able to get it up to a commander's level in such a way, and presenting it in such a way, and knowing how to present it, and selling it, balancing the ROI and building that business case for a commander, and like talking about what's important to him, his NMC hours and his sorties, and just knowing how to speak to the project and say why it's worth investing into. What that did is it came from something that if I would have socialized this anywhere within my unit, it would have been like, cool, good idea. I don't know how to help you. And that would have been the extent of it. Like it would have went nowhere. But because of the thing, and also if I would have walked up to my production super without any stakeholder backing in this, without any champions, and asked him to install this in an aircraft. So we ran a test of locally printed covers for 2 weeks in 18 of our aircraft. And during that 2 weeks, we had 0 incidents. We had 0 damaged switches. And then for context, the week after, we had 4 damaged switches. The first 3 days that we weren't running with these covers, we kicked off 4 switches. But we never would have gotten that out of the commander. Out of the production super, if we had not built, like known how to sell our product to the stakeholders, and essentially had that backing up of the champions. Be able to say like, yeah, this is something we're willing to buy the risk off on, and then the motivation to keep going. Like when things sucked, it's the fact that we're dealing with a problem on a weekly basis. We every week we come in here. If we go a week without kicking a switch off, it's just good graces. I've got guys that I'm constantly assigning, hey, go grab the borescope. You're sticking it in the seat and you're going to be looking for the switch because you kicked another one off. Like, so that's been a lot of motivation to help keep going. And then just a different thing to do, the different aspect of the job. Like this is unknown territory to work into. So going out to these events like the refinery and getting involved with that, and then Ether Sprint, going on TDYs to go present the project to stakeholders is definitely another motivating thing to say, okay, like you get your time allotted to actually work on something. And it's not this third project that you got to deal with when you go home. Those 200 hours that I initially spent at the very beginning, I no longer have to do that as much. Say as much, we're still doing it, but no, just fixing the problem is really what it comes down to as the main motivation. Not having to deal with this thing again and immortalizing the idea within the JSF program.
I love it. As we wrap up here, guys, I always like to ask if you could go back to the first week or first day when this idea or problem came to your mind and you just started, and you got to go back and tell yourself something before you started this journey, what would it be?
The first thing that came to mind was resin's not going to work. Spent a lot of time trying to make resin work, and this resin wasn't going to work. So sometimes it's just good. I cut my losses before we're stuck too much time into it, but it got kind of where it needed to go. But there's a lot of issues and yeah, the material choice, knowing exactly what it needs to be printed out of would be nice to know right from the get-go. Then aside from that, other than giving myself all the hints for the design considerations that I figured out on the 10th prototype. That'd have been some good information to get. But I mean, really what it comes down to is just, it's going to work. If I can say anything, I guess, too, is it's going to work. Just keep going. Keep trying.
I love it. Yeah. Team, I don't know if you guys wanted to jump in with questions on your side. Guys, that's an awesome product. Just sitting here, I know Barry and I, we used to spend a lot of time together at AMUs, different AMUs at Lake and Heath. So even as supply people, like anytime we see guys on the line championing and getting stuff done to make it easier, not just for yourselves, but even your supply reps within your squadron, it's like it makes our supply hearts just flutter a little bit. And I just think this idea, getting to do this with Tesseract and meet new people and meet people like you that see these problems and just have the wherewithal to be able to persevere and push through the different wickets and the different hurdles and the stuff that you don't know what you don't know, right? And you're going through 10, 11, 12 prototypes. But just being able to go into the office and, like you said, you're dedicating guys and girls to grab a borescope just to continually go do this. I just love that, you have that with you to be like, this is still worth it. Like this will give something better, not only to aircraft, but to people. And that's why I love being able to do this. So to me, that's a thanks to you guys for identifying this thing and not stopping.
Appreciate it.
So you guys got the sprint coming up. When's that? When's your next presentation? Obviously, you want to get this thing as high up as you can, but what does it mean to you to be able to be selected so far as a semifinalist? And what is your next hope for this project?
I think our next hope is that our validation. So right now we're currently waiting on the shipment of these. We're in the final stages. We've hit a major manufacturing hurdle. These were supposed to begin manufacturing in October. However, we just got our first one printed off in December. Approved it, greenlit it. Luckily, the first draft of the production SLS printing was good, and we were able to approve the material for use and then get them to green light printing off 60 of them. Once that happens and we have those covers, we begin our 3-month validation. We're planning the end of January for that. January 31st is what we're looking at. And from there, once we validate whether or not it works, hopefully, fingers crossed, it works. Hopefully 11 prototypes got us to a working MVP that actually quantifiably affects the problem. And because it's not just like a physical product thing, there's also the people side of it. I'm asking the pilot to put this on. And part of that is I'm asking him to do it. And I have to make it as least painful as possible and streamline the process as much as I can to make it to where he'll actually put this thing on to get out of the aircraft. So it's not only just creating a good product, but or product that does the job, but the product that's actually going to realistically get implemented. And we know how guys work on the flight line. You throw anything difficult in the way, and it's inevitably it's going to show. But hopefully we've addressed a lot of those concerns with the 2-week validation. We did get a lot of feedback from aircrew and maintenance personnel alike. We made some last tweaks to it that brought us from version 10 to version 11 and then version 12. But once our validation, we start seeing some numbers back from it. Our next step that we're really looking to get at is the data acquisition, getting out of the data acquisition phase with the OMO team and getting back to have our second meeting with them. And we're anywhere between 3 months and 9 months. That meeting is going to come up. It just depends on where they triage us within their team to address this project. But that timing links up pretty good because that should be the end of our validation. We'll be able to say whether or not this works. And then if this doesn't work, we'll figure out why, and we'll address the why, attack that why, and then reevaluate the product and see if we fix it. We're kind of in that cycle right now of implementation, see if it works. Well, did it work? No. Why not? All right, fix it, go back in, see if it works. So hopefully we get a pretty good pass through on this first one though. I think we have pretty good reason to suspect that it's gonna do the job. Then once we get there is if we can work with Lockheed, because we have the IP protection of this with the Air Force, it is Air Force property, the cover. Working with Lockheed to have Lockheed license this from the Air Force or purchase this from the Air Force to be able to integrate into the JSF program and sustain it for the Air Force. And then hopefully that's what we're really looking at. Once these things finally ship to other units from Lockheed themselves, that's when I can finally put a fork in it and walk away. But as far as the Ether Sprint goes, getting it out to LOA, that's more socialization and more channels that can help us get this thing fixed, because it's a different COA essentially. Because if we don't get the Lockheed support on this, our first COA, we're going to be, I don't want to be stuck nowhere. We need to have some sort of sustainment for this because the Air Force wants this. Hands down, the Air Force wants this or some version of it. They want the version of this that works. And once we can prove that the version of this that works is out there, if Lockheed doesn't buy off on it, because the JPO is a difficult monster to rattle with. There's a lot of different people that got to say yes to get something across the finish line there. But Our COA 2 is getting this thing fielded through the in the supply system in the Air Force, getting it in NSN and giving all of our Air Force partners the ability to just punch this thing into our legacy part supply system and then get these delivered to their base and then implement them themselves in the ways that we've done it here. So that's really our plan forward.
Yeah, that's fantastic, guys. Well, I wish you the best of luck. I know you're super busy over there. I remember what it was like at Lake and Heath. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit down with us for a little bit and explain your product. And again, just best of luck. And I can't wait to see this thing through.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Nate.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. Chris, Caleb, you guys on the line too. Thank you all. Emil, as always, appreciate you guys. And once this is done, I assume it's going to be on to the next project because you guys are killing it.
Already picking one up right now.
Yeah. The one thing I do love about this is like what you guys were saying, the motivator is essentially you guys are just making a difference. And at the bottom of it, that's the biggest motivator. And I think more people need to hear that versus, hey, your reward is a coffee cup. You're not even concerned about that. You're concerned about making a difference. And I think that's the big deal.
Yeah.